Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm featuring one pot meals. Last weekend my son told me that he had these vegetables left over from a purchase that he made at H Mart, and he said I could have what was left over. I've been thinking all week about what I want to do with these vegetables, and the first thing that came to mind is to make an Asian inspired soup. All I need are these veggies, some noodles, and some bouillon. And this cabbage is a little bit stale, so I'm going to just plop it in some cold water and let that sit while I clean the rest of the vegetables and get these ready. And this is Napa cabbage. It's used frequently in Asian cooking. It has a subtle sweetness to it, and it's very mild. And this is generally the main ingredient in kimchi. My current bouillon that I have on hand is this Better Than Bouillon vegetable seasoning, so I'm going to use that to season the broth. And I need a quick cooking noodle to add in at the very end, and I was trying to decide between these soba-like noodles and these brown rice noodles. Both of these are fast cooking, so I'll think about which noodle to use while I'm cooking my soup. And I have these pots that I picked up at H Mart a while ago, and I thought it would be fun to cook the soup in one of these. And I have two. I have a larger one and a smaller one. I've always seen them cooking soups in these, and I just thought it would be so much fun. I've used these as serving platters up to this point. I thought they were so nice with the lids to keep food nice and hot, but I have always wanted to use these on top of the stove. I'm just a little bit worried about whether they're going to crack or not. I think these are technically called dolsa in Korean cooking, but I thought today would be a nice time to play around with this. I did some research online and they said you just need to be really careful to not do drastic temperature changes. So I started by rinsing this with hot water, and then I put it on the stove at a very low temperature. And then I'm just going to slowly increase that temperature and bring this to boiling. And I need to leave enough space in the pot for my vegetables and noodles. I washed all of the vegetables and cut them up into bite-sized pieces. And I've got the heat on very low, and then I'll just gradually increase it. And this tastes just about where I want it to be. Cooking the vegetables in this broth is going to enhance it even more, because all of the flavors of these vegetables will of course impart their goodness into the broth. And I always hope that my viewers pick up technique more than individual recipes on my channel, because when you learn techniques, then it opens all the doors to making as many meals and varieties of meals as you want. And in this technique, it's seasoning base, vegetables, and quick cooking noodles. And with those three categories, there are endless possibilities for the kinds of soup that you can make, and they're all so easy. So I did decide to go with these soba noodles, but because I'm running out of room in my pot and I want it to be very vegetable heavy, I'm going to go ahead and just use half of these. And I successfully got my stove from a 2 up to an 8, so this is almost to the boiling point. I could cover it with the lid, but I think I prefer to just sit here and watch it with the lid uncovered. I do love soups so much. They're so economical, and one of my New Year's food goals was to try to explore more types of soups, especially those that are foreign to me or I have no experience with. And these mushrooms are already imparting such a rich and savory flavor into that broth. They're delicious. Okay, I'm going to add some of the enoki mushrooms in now. These are a little bit sweet, and I thought that since I'm using a Korean dish, I should try to add some Korean seasonings. I have the gochugaru sauce, and I also have this red pepper Japanese seasoning. It's called togarashi. But like I said, since I'm making a Korean dish, I think I'll add a little bit of the gochugaru sauce in here. And if you're not familiar with this, it is a hot sauce, but it's a paste made with Korean peppers, which are slightly sweet and smoky. And then it's got some tomato paste and a little bit of sweetener and some other things in it. But I'm not really looking to have a hot soup. I just want a little bit of that flavor in there. I don't usually tend to like much heat in my soups. They make these little wooden trays to sit underneath the clay pots, but I have this cutting board that's going to work just perfectly. You definitely need something because the pot is going to be very hot. Once my soup is ready, I go ahead and add the last ingredients, and that's the shredded carrots and the noodles. These noodles only take about 30 seconds in boiling water to cook, basically just until they're tender. And I'm just going to help these along. I definitely don't want to overcook them. This is one of the reasons I like to use some of these Asian noodles, because they're so quick cooking and it makes making soup or other types of meals like stir fries so easy. You just throw the noodles in at the very end. And I'm kind of realizing now I probably should have cut the noodles in the other direction just so that they would be a little bit longer. I do like long noodles. I know some people don't, but I like them long. And I decided to make a balanced meal out of this by adding some protein in. And for me, that just means adding a few sticks of teriyaki tofu that I got from Trader Joe's, and then I just threw them in the air fryer. And this is a super economical way to eat meat. You can add in very thin slices of beef. You can use chicken. You can also use pork. Generally for beef, it's like ribeye, brisket, top sirloin, those cuts. And also you can get inexpensive pork belly to add in here, but you just use a very small amount and slice them very thinly, and they're going to cook quickly and help to season that broth. You can also do the same thing with chicken. I almost forgot my green onions. I probably should have added these in a little bit earlier. And then I'm going to add some more of the carrots. I'm realizing one of the beauties of cooking in a pot like this is how hot it keeps your food. It continues to stay warm all while you're eating it. And the broth is so savory. The cabbage is tender and slightly sweet. I do wish I would have put half of the cabbage in and then added the other half at the very end, so we get a little bit of a combination of the sweetness and also the crunch of the cabbage. So I think next time I'm going to do that. I could add it on right now, but I want to save that cabbage for another bowl of this tomorrow. And then I wanted to try these mushrooms. Oh my gosh, these mushrooms are so chewy and they've given so much flavor to that broth. It's almost like I'm eating a rich mushroom broth. It's just been so long since I've made a soup with mushrooms that I've forgotten what a great seasoning agent these can be. And I also love how the tofu soaks up the flavor and the richness of that broth. And it also helps to make this a more complete meal for me with all of that added protein. I do think I will also add the carrots on at the very end next time, just because for those shredded carrots, I like to add those a lot with different kinds of recipes. They're just delicious just as they are, just kind of crispy, and it adds a lot to a soup when you have all of those different textures, which is one of the reasons I like pozole and pho so much. So next time, I'm going to do a better job with my fresh toppings. Anyway, it's always so much fun when you can have a little food adventure in your own kitchen, especially when you can use ingredients that you already have on hand. I liked using this pot. I'll definitely do this again. It just helps to keep the soup so much hotter. And I love how quick and easy it is to throw this together with these noodles that cook so quickly. I ate every last drop of this, and I'm looking forward to making that again. For my next meal, I'm making one of my all-time favorite dishes, and that is picadillo. I discovered this a couple of years ago when I was coming up with meals for my channel. And here are the ingredients. And I make this with both ground beef and a plant-based beef version. And in this video, I'll be showing both. I used a little bit different ingredients for each one. Picadillo is a traditional dish in many Latin American countries, including Mexico and Cuba, as well as the Philippines. And it's made with ground meat, which is where the name comes from. Picar is a Spanish word that means to mince. So that's the root of the word picadillo. And this is made differently depending on what region or country it's made in. In Cuba, it's made with green peppers, green olives, and raisins. In the Mexican version of this dish, green chilies are used instead of green peppers. And of course, in both dishes, lots of garlic, onions, and cumin are used. And then there's always some variety in terms of the tomatoes, whether you use whole tomatoes, whether you use tomato sauce. You could always add a little tomato paste instead, along with some water. And then sometimes beef bouillon powder is used, but I'm using chicken bouillon powder because that's what my family prefers. And people do like to cut up their potatoes in different ways. However, I cut mine a little thin and I tried to be as uniform as possible just so that they'll all finish cooking at the same time. And this is one of those kind of recipes that if you're missing one ingredient, it's not going to be a big deal. Obviously, just go ahead and make it without it. This is a very forgiving dish. And for this meat version of picadillo, I'm going to be using whole tomatoes. And my son doesn't like pieces of the tomatoes in his recipes, so I'm just going to go ahead and blend this up real quickly. But obviously you could use a small can of tomato sauce if you'd rather. It'd probably be easier, and then just add that to the pan. And I'm gonna use a little water in this to make sure that I get all of it out, and then add that in. If you wanted to make your life super easy, you could always use a can of diced potatoes and these fire roasted diced tomatoes. The diced tomatoes already have the tomatoes and chili peppers in there, so if you're making the Mexican version of this, those would work out perfectly. When I was making the homemade version of Hamburger Helper in one of my recent videos, I thought about this dish. In fact, my thoughts always come back to this dish. That's just how delicious and how savory this meal is. And I like to add my carrots in at the end of cooking. But you can substitute out any other vegetable that you want, but this is what I had on hand. And then I'm just going to let that simmer for a while. And then I'm going to taste it to see how I need to adjust my seasonings. Because potatoes do require a lot of salt, and I really didn't add any other than the bouillon, I needed to adjust this a bit and add some more bouillon in. And I'm also going to add just a touch of tomato sauce because tasting it, I do feel like it needs just a little bit more. And then I'm going to let this simmer and it should be ready to go. People use this in a variety of ways. Sometimes they add it over rice, and sometimes they'll eat it with some tortillas and refried beans on the side, which is my favorite way to eat this. And then sometimes they use the mixture to make tacos with. Okay, and here is my plant-based version of this. I basically did all of the same steps except for I used the burger crumbles, and I added a little oil to the pan to make up for the fat that was missing in that plant-based meat. And then for this version, I added a can of Rotel, which had the tomatoes and green chilies in it. And I do suggest the mild can of this. And of course, you can add separate cans of green chilies and tomatoes if you'd rather. And then instead of the chicken bouillon, I used a vegetable bouillon. And this is what the meat version looked like. And you can make this as saucy as you want, obviously by just adding a little more water and bouillon. But I wanted to serve this one thick. A lot of times people eat this inside tacos as well, or along with some tortilla shells. But this was delicious. It was savory. The potatoes were cooked perfectly. It has all that flavor. This is like another spin on Hamburger Helper. And here's the plant-based version. And for mine, I made it a little saucier. It has such wonderful flavor, and I do love the tomatoes in there. If somebody was trying to eat lower carb and they didn't want to have the potatoes, obviously you could put pieces of cauliflower in here, or even rutabaga might be nice in this dish. And since I had some mild green olives on hand, I decided to try that in this dish. And for me, that was a winner because you had the savoriness of the dish, and then every now and then you would get the bite of that delicious, salty, briny olive. It was just a really, really nice combination. And my very favorite way to eat this, the one that I think about and I crave frequently, is to have this along with some refried beans and tortillas. And this was so good. Like I said in the beginning, this is one of my all-time favorite meals. I should probably try to make some freezer meals with this because it's a dish that I'm always thinking of. I think it's the combination of flavors that makes it a 10 for me. During the last video, I talked a little bit about the library, and I also told you that I would let you know about the 2 books that I read to get me off to a great start in the new year. For Christmas, I had requested this Atomic Habits book. This has been a bestseller for a very long time, and many people claim that this book is life-changing. And basically, it subscribes to a belief that I already had, which is that small changes make huge differences. It's funny because one of my coworkers saw this book on my desk because I was reading it on my breaks, and he said, "That book changed my life." I thought that was quite a profound thing to say. And so I did really enjoy this book, and I do think it's going to help me to obtain some of the goals that I want to achieve this year. During my last video, I was discussing how I had discovered this Libby app to where it connected to my local library and I could just download these ebooks and I didn't even have to leave my house. And I found this book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And I'm sure a lot of people have either heard of this or already read it because this Marie Kondo has become quite famous for this book. And I just thought it was a really good book to skim through and get me motivated for kind of going through my house and getting rid of items that I don't need. And basically the big thing in this book is if it doesn't spark joy, then don't keep it. And she has lots of other good advice in this book. Anyway, I thought that those were 2 really great books to get the new year started. And I had some suggestions in the comments of my last video, in addition to all the other free things that I said that you could get at the library, like movies, books, audiobooks, ebooks, national parks passes. One of my viewers let me know that you can also get free museum passes to museums in your area, which I thought was really great. And one of the things I liked most is having all of these resources free without ever having to leave my home. And one of my viewers told me about Hoopla, and like Libby, this comes on the website and you can also download it for an app for your phone, which was important to me because I wanted to be able to read some of these ebooks at work. But on Hoopla, they had the added benefit that you could do these binge passes, and you could get seasons of shows that you wanted to watch. My viewer also said that I could check out books without a wait here. However, when I went to look for the book that I wanted, it was only available in audiobooks. And I found that a lot of times the availability of audiobooks is so much greater. But for me, the problem is that anytime I'm read to, I automatically just fall asleep, because that's how I help myself go to sleep at night. I listen to like some theology books being read to me, and then anyway, I just fall asleep. So that's a no-go for me, but it's definitely worth trying to explore these different apps to find the resources that you like best. And lastly, one of my goals for the new year is to read more fiction. So if you guys have any ideas for some stellar books that you've read, let me know in the comments below. That's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I'll see you next Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way.